The German invading force is speeding to capture Oslo. The blow against Norway is launched. Warships loaded with troops, which they are to land. Soldiers wearing life belts, should the vessel be sunk in battle. The naval squadron drives through the waters of the Skagerrak for the surprise attack that transformed the war in Europe. These newsreel pictures are as permitted by the German censorship and were flown across the Atlantic by clipper ship. They show history moving to a fateful climax. They know they're in danger of attack. There is an attack by a British warplane and aircraft fire. They shoot a stream of tracer shells. The squadron steams on and into the fjord of Oslo. Mere hours before, Berlin demanded of Denmark and Norway that they yield to German control. Denmark did yield, but Norway refused. Norway would resist. Oslo, on a steep and rocky fjord, was strongly situated for defense. But defense was demoralized. There are reports of treachery, secret agent plotting, fifth column, and Trojan horse tactics. There was some fighting, and Nazi ships were sunk, but not enough resistance to prevent the Germans from landing and swiftly seizing Oslo. From the harbor, a Nazi seaplane flies on some mission of war. The Norwegian capital made to serve as a German air base. The unloading of troops and supplies illustrates with what thoroughness the surprise invasion was prepared. Heavy equipment, tanks, modern weapons, mechanized war to be waged with motorized speed, a new blitzkrieg to be launched by those battalions seizing a neutral nation. Headed by a regimental band, a goose-stepping parade. Simultaneously, other Norwegian ports are seized in much the same fashion. The sudden Nazi blow captures the important Norwegian harbors and air bases, putting the Allied counterattack under a grave handicap, giving the Nazi invaders a strategic advantage in the Norwegian war. Historic events are being shaped by these scenes in Oslo. The Ile de France departs from New York Harbor on a mission of war. No official information is given of where she is going. The French luxury liner is painted a wartime gray, and she carries a wartime cargo, metals of military use, and aircraft. She has aboard a great quantity of airplanes and parts, these consigned to the Allies in Europe. The Ile de France has been docked at New York since the beginning of the war. Now loaded with planes, she follows the example of the British liners Mauretania and Queen Mary. Only the French boat is bound apparently for Europe. They take their places in the circling chairs for a glimpse into the future. At the New York World's Fair, what things will look like 20 years hence. Highways and horizons of 1960. We move around a vista of roads, a bridge between mountains where the highway is truly high. Traffic lanes regulated at varying rates of speed, and the way they emerge from a tunnel. Across the bridge, the stream of automobiles in reproduced clever miniature, and the highway takes us into the city of the future. This is the vision that architects and engineers have summoned of the metropolis soon to come. The best riders of the West are in this rodeo. For example, here's Tom Mix of the movies, still quite a rider. Does that cowboy stay on for the required period? You bet he does. This chap has a rough ride, but a successful one. Though when you get off a wild Mustang, it's likely to mean a spill. There's a large percentage of successful rides here at Newhall, California, a tribute to the list of bronco busters in the bucking show. Some are tossed, of course, and that bronc is ornery, and so is that steer. Not content with tossing the cowboy, the critter wants to gore him too. Gore him too.
The two Glamour Debs of this year and last welcome the guests. There's Mrs. George Washington Cavanaugh, escorted by Prince Falco and Prince Filiberto de Bourbon. And we see Countess de Santa Cruz and Maurice de Cobra. Glamour Debs Josephine Johnson and Patricia Plunkett say hello to another Deb, Nancy Martin. What's the social occasion for this swanky gathering? Oh, there are Rita Meyer and Thomas Murray, Jr. What's the gala event at the 9 o'clock club in New York? They're acclaiming the debutantes selected for Glamour this year. At a table is Barbara Smith and Donald Livingston. All the younger set is here. Paul Livermore and Rosemary Bradley. The Glamour Deb is a recent and interesting innovation in the nightclub set. Susan Stevenson and Peter Vogel come to see the glamorizing ceremony. Also, Lear Dobson Eddy and Xavier Benziger. Elizabeth Provost and Richard Proctor. Society is agog. The social register is aflutter as Patricia Plunkett, who was acclaimed last season, presents to Josephine Johnson the bouquet that makes her the Glamour Deb of 1940.
Am I happy all the news ain't serious? Here's a graduation day. The Methodist Hospital of Brooklyn is picking the healthiest and huskiest 6 months old out of their latest crop of babies. Guess which one each mama thinks is the best? Certainly. But the doctor and nurse is more scientific. It's all in the diet. You and me couldn't look that way on pig's knuckles with cabbage and chocolate moldeds. There's a bathing beauty. Ain't she cute? While the doctor is tuning in, how about a little smile? Okay, that's enough for 'em. It's a shame they grow up into us. Sure, some of them cry. Now, stop it. You grow up with a scrunched face. And here's the winner, baby Rose Bloisy. A Rose by any other name, Rose, don't eat the prize. Cute, the new belle of Brooklyn. Hello, Mom. Hello, Pop. Me and the Dodgers, hey, Pop?
The camera highlights in the world of sports. Maryland's famed Hunt Cup. It's America's #1 steeplechase, and especially unique today as 20th Century Fox's cameras record the grueling 4-mile classic for the coming Technicolor production Maryland. On location, therefore, we find the noted director, Henry King, shown at the moment telling Mrs. Thorgerson's boy what the big picture's all about. In the starting field of 10 finely trained thoroughbreds may be seen such ranking timber toppers as Cornwall, Myrmidon, Cherry Brook, Montear, and the valiant 11-year-old favorite Blockade. Two-time winner of this killing grind, Blockade needs only to win today to retire the most famous chasing trophy of them all. Naturally, therefore, there are few in the crowd of 20,000 spectators whose straining eyes and fondest hopes are not riding on the old campaigner Blockade, for it seems that in his every stride we're reminded of his pappy, who happens to be none other than the immortal man of war. Great, then, is the joy and excitement of Blockade's owner, Mrs. E. Reed Beard, and her daughter, when out in front, after 22 of the world's toughest rail jumps, comes the stout-hearted Blockade. Beautifully ridden by Mr. Fred Caldwell, Blockade comes driving home, a pace that marks him indeed a worthy son of man of war. It's on Reading, Pennsylvania's treacherous half-mile dirt track today that Eastern speed merchants hold their first jam session of the season, and the scene soon takes on all the earmarks of a prairie cyclone. Main event here is a 20-lap whirl around the dusty oval, and they take 'em with all stops out, so let 'em roar, boys, and may Lady Luck be with you. After about 9 minutes of this bedlam, 'tis said that Mark Light of Lebanon comes home the winner, and for proof of same, you'll probably find him behind that cloud of dust.
sweep the cities of Belgium and northern France, the devastated area of the Battle of Flanders. This is Tournai, a strategic point, as the hosts of Nazi Germany struck, seeking to annihilate the northern armies of the Allies. Everything bombed, blasted, and aflame. The Nazi Air Force striving to demoralize and disorganize, to cut off all retreat. This is the inferno of Flanders, from which the Allies effected an almost miraculous withdrawal, out of the trap by sea. The horror of war and invasion as cities burn. A church on fire. It has a tall steeple, a stately spire of medieval architecture. Engulfed in flames, it falls. Warplanes seen endlessly in the sky, bombing and fighting. German air raiders, Allied fighters on high. While anti-aircraft fire dots the heavens, a maze of exploding shells, and we see a Nazi warplane shot down. Fatally hit, the stricken craft plunges to earth. There it is, a wreck pitted with the scars of battle, riddled with bullets, and it takes plenty of shooting to bring down modern warplanes. Wrecks of German aircraft are a common sight on the Flanders battlefield. The Allies shot them down by the hundreds, but they kept on coming. Sky power of numbers that could take flaming losses. Ground forces hurry to the battle line, fighting the rear guard action in Flanders and massing to block the threatened German drive against Paris. The Nazis won a swift initial success, and the Allies muster for the decisive. Some of the pitiful 5 minutes. The hideous scourge of war swept over some of the most populous areas of this earth. Belgium, northern France, busy and flourishing with an industrious people. These people, homeless, bereaved. They were swept away, fleeing before the destroying tide. Quarters for the Belgian refugees in Paris. They come helpless and hungry, are fed and cared for. He sought his wife and children among the refugees and found they had perished. She has learned that she is a widow, grieving sorrow everywhere. Orphans, perhaps, they are too young to grieve. A police car raiding Sir Oswald Mosley's British fascists, a prisoner, defiant. He gives the fascist salute as he's taken away to prison. Scotland Yard arrests a woman fascist in the middle there, and she gives a most defiant salute. Britain takes stern measures against the Fifth Column. Enemy aliens are rounded up, placed in camps. Britain was lenient during months of war, but now invasion threatens, and Nazi Fifth Column tactics were only too vivid in the invaded neutral nations. So all Germans are interned like this, aliens who might become part of a Fifth Column. Re-evacuated, London children who were sent to the East Coast at the beginning of the war. Now invasion threatens those shores, and the children must part with the local people who have been taking care of them. They're being re-evacuated to places inland, less threatened by war and bombing. Launching a battleship, a new sea giant at the Philadelphia Navy Yard. 15-year-old Virginia Marshall, descendant of the famous Supreme Court Chief Justice, christens the USS Washington. And the mighty unit of sea power slides down the way. American battleships are named after states. This newest one, after the state of Washington. But the name is also that of the great architect of American freedom. Battleship Washington, appropriate as the nation arms to protect its freedom. President Roosevelt calls the National Advisory Defense Commission into session. The President asks Congress to make new appropriations for armament that bring the national defense total up to $5 billion. This commission of experts in various fields will supervise expenditures and production under the arms program. Memorial Day, the solemn yearly observance. In Washington, at Arlington, the tomb of the unknown soldier, a gold star mother lays a wreath. And these are mothers of sons who gave their lives in France. In New York, veterans of the GAR, They marched briskly to the war that ended 75 years ago. Now the drum beats are slow. Only a few are left to march with lagging steps. The giant artillery of the New York Harbor Defense has gunnery practice for the first time in 5 years. A 16-inch rifle hurling a 2,000-pound shell. And the monster gun shoots 17 miles out to sea.
Camera highlights in the world of sport. Threatening weather fails to discourage 150,000 racing fans. The famed Indianapolis Speedway is jammed for this 28th running of the 500-mile classic. Headman Eddie Rickenbacker, pacemaker of yesteryear, and Steve Hannigan. But there they go. 33 in all attempt the grueling grind. Flashing mechanized marvels of steel. Rex Mays, number 33, takes the lead. Dapper Wilbur Shaw, last year's winner, is in the pit changing tires. They average 114 3/10 miles an hour on a wet track, only a mile an hour less than last year on a perfect racing strip. Here comes Shaw, number 1, and he's never hit it. There's the checkered flag that brings him $30,000. Yes, it's Wilbur again, the first man to make it 2 in a row, and also a 3-time winner. Mrs. Shaw rewards our hero, and best of all, Death took a holiday. In the far west, Del Monte, California, we find some girls that like to go with a thrill. Polo is the means, and they're all sweet 16 or thereabouts. Meet the Pogonips of Santa Cruz and the hometowners of the Douglas School. There's the ball, girls. Go to it. And do they? Just think, folks, this is the game that was started by some hard-riding cavalrymen of the long, long ago. Get that little lady's drive. Here's a Pogonip goal. Female centaurs, every one. Hard riding is their dish. Here's another Pogonip goal. But believe it or not, Douglas wins 5-4. After all, who cares for what's prettier than 4 young lassies? Summer horse racing in Southern California opens with a bang. 40,000 customers pass through the turnstiles at Hollywood Park, Inglewood, to welcome the thoroughbreds back to the land of sunshine. 22,000 cars, think of that. The $10,000 Hollywood Premier Handicap with 13 entrants is the feature attraction. There's Sonia Haynier, 20th Century Fox star, and Dan Topping. Miss Deanna Durbin. Don Amici on the right. Glamorous Marlene Dietrich on the left. And oh yes, there is a race. In the backstretch, it's Carmenita, second choice in the betting, who leads. Specify the favorite out of the running. Into the home stretch, Lassiter takes command. But watch Captain Cal, number 4, nearest the camera. And it's a photo finish with a 9-1 shot, snatching the oats.
A swift movement of troops has been ordered, so there's a dash to the plain. It's a stratoliner giving a demonstration of the fastest kind of military maneuver. Burbank, California, and there's a flight toward a military objective. In an emergency, the Air Corps has the power to call all commercial planes for service like this. Landing at the point to be occupied, all American commercial planes would make up a fleet to transport tens of thousands of troops, like this force of National Guard soldiers with full military equipment. excavation is complete for the $50 million Shasta Dam in California, and all is ready to begin the building of the mighty wall of concrete. Mount Shasta, its eternal snows feed the Sacramento River, one of the 3 to be dammed. There comes the first bucket of cement for the actual beginning of the construction. 6 million cubic yards of cement will be used. And there, the first 18 cubic yards are poured. It's to be the second largest masonry dam in the world.
Papa fixes Mama for a parachute jump. The Warren Allen Hot Air Balloon Act is an entertainment feature, but Mrs. Allen has never before tried a jump. So the children are surprised as Mama goes soaring high. She has often seen her husband in a balloon stunt, and now, at Scottsville, New York, she proves that she can do it too. 33 years old and mother of 5. Yes, dear children, away up there, that's Mama. And watch her detach the parachute and go floating downward. Come on down, Mama. And that's what Mama does. She lands safe and sound. Mrs. Warren Allen claims to be the first mother to make a parachute jump from a balloon.
A speed record is made as the Stratoliner lands at LaGuardia Field, New York, across the continent from Los Angeles in 12 hours and 13 minutes, at high altitude, an average of 17,000 feet. Another Stratoliner, winging the other way, broke the transcontinental record for the westbound flight, a 2-way epic of swiftness and altitude, and with passengers. Ah, what passengers! Stars of Hollywood flew a trail of high adventure in the skyboys that made aviation history. Tyrone Power and motion picture executive Herman Wahlberg, and 2 fellow passengers of the stratosphere, Nancy Kelly and Brenda Joyce. Paulette Goddard made the flight so fast and high. To greet Tyrone Power, Annabella, the 20th Century Fox star, and his wife after a sky voyage that was a record breaker and a thrill. They take the lofty trail, the myriad flock of sheep. What happens if one should fall into the river? Oh, it just means a mighty wet sheep. Montrose, Colorado, 1 million sheep each summer are driven high into the mountains to graze, and on they go nimbly. Above the snow line in a land of mountain beauty and grandeur, at this chilly altitude their fleece will grow thick, abundant wool for shearing, mountains towering to 14,000 feet. The summer drive of the sheep to lofty pastures in the Rockies, yearly migration, a life cycle.
Camera highlights in the world of sports. Baseball's Midsummer Classic finds more than 32,000 sweltering fans crowded into Sportsman's Park, St. Louis, with the American Leaguers rated 1-2 favorites to win the 8th annual All-Star Game. Cleveland's Bob Feller gets a fan slant from Joey Brown. But of what is about to happen, they have no idea. For it's in the first inning. Ruffing pitches to Herman. A sharp single to right. Archie Vaughan on a hit-and-run play streaks around to third. None out, and the din is slightly terrific. Comes it now, the Boston Bees' Max West, pilot Bill McKechnie's overnight shift in the national starting lineup, and wham! Labeled a home run in any ballpark. The ball travels 360 feet into the right field pavilion. Vaughan and Herman lead the parade across the plate, and the Nationals are out in front by a count of 3-0. That was a low, fast ball that Ruffing laid in the groove, and West let go with everything he had. It proves to be the wallop that sews up the ball game. But with a 3-run lead, these National Leaguers turn back the most serious American threat in the top of the 6th, when Travis hits into a double play, a stifling blow that enables the Nationals to achieve the first whitewash in All-Star history by a final count of 4-0. Rivaling the famed ordeal up the Pikes Peak Trail, the whiz-bang boys of mountain climbing have uncovered a new scene of torture here at Grand Mesa, Colorado. And mister, if you're a speed demon with leanings toward this kind of play, well, you're practically up in heaven. For this Sunday driver's nightmare unwinds itself 10,500 feet above sea level, with enough treacherous skids and hairpin turns to scare the daylights out of a mountain goat. For 14 and a half miles, they churn their way up and around the Rocky Mountain slopes, mostly up. First to scale the heights and gets the flag is Al Rogers, local boy who covers the distance in 18 minutes, 3 and 9/10 seconds, which is to say Alfred has dusted off a record. New Jersey's Ocean City brings together a star-studded collection of feminine form in the Women's National AAU Track and Field Carnival, with a camera's lens at the moment trained on the 80-meter hurdles. Speediest of these timber-topping flyers is Miss Sybil Cooper in the far lane, a high striding lass with a finishing kick that brings her home in the time of 13 and 1/10 seconds. A slow-motion study of Miss Alice Coachman soaring over the bar at the winning height of 4 feet 11 inches. Individual queen of the meet is the Polish Olympic performer Stella Walsh, seen here in the home stretch of the 200-meter dash that she wins in 26 and 1/10 seconds. A few moments later, Stella Walsh again bounding into the forefront of the feminine world of sports.
What is bathing without beauties? Hope springs eternal in the human chest in a bathing suit. They all hope to be the modern Venus at Steeplechase Park, Coney Island. What has Venus got that they ain't? No arms. Besides, who cares about arms in a beauty contest? Certainly. Or the face. The important thing is, what counts most? Certainly. Any judge can see that with half an eye. Poor fella. They all, what's this? Who let them outsizers in? Shut the gate. No, go on home, we don't want any. The bulges is too big. Okay, she can stay. Or now, where was he hiding? Time for getting measured. Small ankles is favored today by the experts on dainty knees as a sign of beauty. But, measuring up to expectations is the winner, number 19, Carolyn Hansen, the modern Venus. And if you didn't notice before, her face is also beautiful.
Second evening of this historic convention. For the first time, the great Chicago Stadium is packed, waiting for the message from the absent president, which they are now to hear from the convention chairman, Kentucky's Alben Barkley, leader of the Democratic majority in the Senate.
The president has never had, and has not today, any desire or purpose to continue in the office of president, to be a candidate for that office, or to be nominated by the convention for that office.
That touches off the fireworks. He hasn't said no. They're free to vote for him. And there's Governor Lehman of New York joining the parade. And now the long-awaited hour, the nominations. The Honorable Lister Hill, Junior Senator from Alabama. Come on, Senator, the name.
The Valiant American Franklin Delano Roosevelt.
All precedent is broken. The third-term tradition is smashed. And here's the vote. On the very first ballot, Farley 72, Garner 11, Tidings 9, Hull 5, and Franklin D. Roosevelt 946, after which they make it by acclamation for a third term.
highway that becomes a headline of international news. Winding from British-controlled Burma to the interior of China, it has been a major line of war supplies for the Chinese armies fighting Japan. Blockading the defender, Japan demanded that Great Britain close the Burma Road, and Britain has yielded, agreeing to stop the shipment of guns, munitions, and gasoline. The depot where supplies are delivered for China. But now Britain is going to close the Burma Road. The American State Department protests. It's a blow to China. Student pilots, as national as China seeks greater air power. Hence the importance of stopping of gasoline shipments along the Burma Road. They go to their planes, Chinese youth training for battles of the sky to fight off the bombers of Japan. Far in the interior of China, they keep their war wings in action. Though Japan tightens the blockade of materials of war, China proclaims continued resistance, fighting and flying. Cadets in training, officers for the dogged fight in the immense interior. The only supply line left to them, after the British-Japanese agreement, is a long, difficult trail from Soviet Russia. Nationalist leader Chiang Kai-shek protests the closing of the Burma Road to munitions for Chinese guns. He rejects peace with the invaders. And China cries, "Resistance, fight on!" The problem is armament and munitions for the modern war of mechanism. For teeming China has manpower, as is pictured by the swarming of thousands of Army cadets. Emperor Hirohito at the Tokyo railway station awaits to greet an imperial visitor. With events developing rapidly in the Far East, the Emperor of Manchukuo arrives in the Japanese capital. He's received with imperial honors, though he's maintained on his throne by the Japanese, a puppet monarch. A new cabinet takes power in Japan, backed by the army, indicating new plans of expansion while war rages in Europe. Far Eastern history is being made as the two emperors reach the imperial palace. Recruits of the United States Naval Reserve are off for some training at sea to qualify as reserve ensigns. Aboard the battleship Wyoming, they're to learn the ways of a warship in actual operation. So aboard they go. 600 college graduates who've enlisted for national defense and are now to sail as midshipmen at sea. They're fitted with these nautical caps, the salty kind of headgear. When properly garbed for life at sea, they line up for inspection. The reserve cadets live a sailor's life, making up their bunks. A thorough course of warship training, complete with Navy discipline.
That package was sent from Europe to New York with 70 cents of postage for registered mail. It's worth $750,000. What's in it? The world's largest uncut diamond, found in Brazil and named after Brazil's president, Vargas. 2.5 inches long, weight more than 5 ounces, more than 726.5 carats. The Vargas compared with the famous Yonkers diamond, $2 million in diamonds, including the $250,000 on the girl's fingers.
The camera highlights in the world of sports. Goshen, New York, America's capital of harness racing, again draws the squire sportsmen from far and near for the Grand Circuit meeting which opened today on the 100-year-old historic track. A 5-day get-together during which young and old will see in action no less than 400 finely bred trotters and pacers, making early bids for those rich future stakes. Always an eye-filling spectacle, the slow-motion camera offers a striking study of the high-strung steeds in their swift and spirited flight around the famous course. And in the driving finish of the Village Farm Stake, it's Saratoga, driven by William Bull, a 2-year-old pacer undefeated and a strong contender for championship laurel in the big events to come. So take a bow, young fellow, you're head man around here today. Chicago's Soldiers Field brings together the amateur leather pushers of Hawaii and the Windy City under the popular banner of the Catholic Youth Organization. There's a third man in the ring tonight who's thrown a few punches himself in his day, and of course you've guessed that it's the old Manassas mauler Jack Dempsey. The scraps range from flyweight to heavyweight, and the former champ has himself a busy night, for there's probably nothing in this world of sports as enthusiastic as a Simon Pure swinging those leather mittens. In fact, there comes a moment here when even the referee takes a poke on the chin. And to add to the general hubbub, there's a rainstorm that dampens everything but the battlers, who carry on to a final verdict of 8 victories to 3, and Chicago's CYO team retains its unbeaten record. Okay, pal, you can ring out your mop now. The show is over. For the last word in the fine art of spinning, we give you a bevy of Philadelphia gals who've won the National Tumbling Championship 3 years running. And a squint through the lens of the slow-motion camera will give you a few reasons why. These are the Tipowitz twins, and slightly terrific. Angie Castellana, who gets the billing of a 4-star champ, unfurls her favorite somersault with a hook to help it along. What makes this little girl the tops is a loop-the-loop through the air with a full body twist and a 2-point landing, but right side up.
French battleship in a British port as Britain resolves that Nazi Germany must never get the French Navy. France capitulated and agreed that its powerful fleet should be interned under German control. The British Navy bombarded a squadron at Oran and took over warships at Alexandria and in British ports. Here, British sailors board French naval units like the submarine Surcouf, the largest undersea craft in the world. The French crews are taken off the ships as Britain acts decisively to prevent the world's 4th largest navy from falling into the hands of Nazi Germany. The war in Africa. Prisoners captured by the British, native troops with Italian officers. They lost their liberty in sharp fighting on the desert frontier of British-controlled Egypt and Italian Libya. The town of Mersa Matruh attacked by Italian bombers. British military post in Egypt blasted. Smoke of destruction, thunder of bombs. A rocky shelter wrecked by high explosive. A shelter in which British newspaper correspondents had taken refuge. They dig out the distinguished journalists. How many are alive? He is, though half buried under the debris of stone. The rocky shelter caved right in on the war correspondents, and he's dusty, cut, and bleeding. Most of the war correspondents emerge okay, with a great story to cable to their papers back home. One of them is badly injured, casualty of an air raid thriller. German prisoners going to Canada. They know that one transport of Germans and Italians was sunk by a U-boat with heavy loss of life. The irony of Germans imperiled by German submarines. 2 handcuffed, legs tied, they tried to escape. Britain sends prisoners and enemy aliens overseas for safekeeping. Heavies for safekeeping. Heavy weather. It's wartime. The lookout from the deck and the lookout from the sky. Scouting afar for the enemy. A paravane, cunning mechanism used against mines. It cuts the cable of an anchored mine, which thereupon floats and is destroyed. Aim the gun. Pom-pom guns dot the sky with bursting anti-aircraft shells as the cannonade continues. President Roosevelt, after his third-term renomination, speaks to the newsreel audience.
Today, all private plans, all private lives have been, in a sense, repealed by an overriding public danger. In the face of that public danger, all those who can be of service to the Republic have no choice but to offer themselves for service in those capacities for which they may be fitted. I will, with God's help, continue to serve with the best of my ability and with the fullness of my strength.
Secretary of Agriculture Wallace, nominated for the vice presidency. In Chicago with Mrs. Wallace, as the Democratic Convention, on advice from the White House, selects him for second place on the ticket. Wendell Willkie, vacationing in Colorado, speaks of his Republican nomination for the presidency.
Now, I'm not going to make any pretensions of noble motives or tell you of my unselfish sacrifices in seeking to be nominated for President of the United States.
Which seems to indicate that plain speaking will be the Willkie way of campaigning.
I frankly sought the opportunity to run for President of the United States on the Republican ticket because I have some very deep-seated convictions which I wanted to present to the American people and which, when I'm elected, I want to carry into execution.
The American delegation to the Pan American Conference is greeted at Havana. Secretary of State Cordell Hull has a plan for Western Hemisphere Economic Union. There's a formal reception by the Cuban cabinet, headed by President Laredo Brooke. The statesmen of the Americas gather to consider the problems raised by a totalitarian-dominated Europe. They seek a united economic front. Secretary Hull sets forth United States objectives at this momentous conference.
I have no doubt that this consultation will prove to be an added demonstration of the vigor and vitality of the American republics working together in their common interest.
The camera highlights in the world of sports. Boston's Suffolk Downs becomes a racing center of attraction today for some 30,000 track fans, as the $65,000 Massachusetts handicap sends 11 starters winging past the stands in the getaway of the mile and a furlong event. Those among the boys and girls who support the mutual betting windows fancied Chaladon at the favorite odds of 9 to 10, but Chaladon must have overlooked the form charts, for he's all but lost in the shuffle. The big noise at the moment is the George D. Widener Colt 830, a good 2 lengths out in front and giving jockey Harry Richards all he's got in a great stretch drive, and he needs it too. For out of a bevy of steeds at his heels comes Hash, number 4, closing in a furious bid to overtake the leader, but 830 stays him off to win $46,500 in track record time. The final round of the Chicago Open, Dick Metz teeing off. Ralph Goldall, 2-time winner of the National Open crown. Sammy Snead unfurls his picture book swing. Connecticut Squire Gene Sarazen. The gallery trailing Lawson Little here on the 9th Sarazen. The gallery trailing Lawson Little here on the 9th green gets an eyeful of the current National Open king, canning a beautiful putt. Dick Metz likewise handles his putter like a magic wand. But there's grief among them too. Ben Hogan, within a stroke of the pacemaker, encounters tough luck on the fatal 13th. There's another lad whose iron shots are things of beauty to behold. He's Johnny Revolta, but here again, Lady Luck seems to be looking the other way. The big shot and head man of the tournament is local boy Dick Metz, whose winning putt here gives him a 1-stroke margin and a total of 278, causing Richard to flash that $1,500 smile.
Now for the whoozes and whatchamacallits department. Before the race, the General Diaper Derby entries remarked, "No, Jason, behind you wear the number. Urania, show some interest at your big chance. Look excited. That's better. When they're off, off the table in the New York World's Fair handicap. Hey, Seabiscuit, give out me the knees. The Poppers is getting hysterical as their entries hit the stretch. There's Urania, he's in front. Come on, Urania, take that lid out of, stretch that diaper, don't step on your pants. He made it. No, please, don't eat the rabbit. The winner, folks, by 3 crawls backwards. Urania Ernest. What's he crying for? Maybe he don't have to. Oh, it's the cup. Hello, champ. You won at World's Fair and Square.
After being renominated, President Roosevelt has a rest at Hyde Park. There, the Oddfellows present him with a jeweled emblem, this in token of his having been a member of the Lodge for 25 years, and now ready for the campaign for a 3rd term. Wendell Willkie vacationing in the West, taking part in the wild and woolly doings at Cheyenne's celebration of Frontier Day. In the wide open spaces, he's relaxing in the interval between his nomination and the months of strenuous campaigning. He sees a rambunctious steer rampaging in the rodeo. It's almost as exciting as trying to figure out the electoral votes. Isn't it, Mr. Presidential Candidate? Propellers for planes manufactured here. Straight from the forge, blades in the rough. They need shaping according to precise mathematics. The Hamilton Standard Propeller plant at Hartford, Connecticut. National Air Defense wouldn't get anywhere without propellers. To give them their final form of scientific exactness is a complicated task. Accuracy of curve and contour means everything. Smoothing the bushings, the process abounds in technical terms. No phase of recent aviation progress has been more remarkable than in propeller science. The blades are polished and then are ready to speed airplanes through the sky. Variable pitch, changing the angle of the blade, adds greatly to its efficiency. And so we see propellers turned out by the thousands, a vital phase of the National Defense Program. Blades for the armed squadrons of the sky. Women and children go, refugees of the Far East. Men at Hong Kong say goodbye to their families. Evacuation day on the China coast. Tension with Japan, apprehension of a Japanese attack. And so there are scenes of parting and goodbye. For the terror of war may come. There's anxiety, misgiving, tears. Some are ill as the refugees board a transport. Japan has demanded that Britain stop war shipments to the fighting Chinese. They blockade Hong Kong to force the British to yield. War in Europe, it may spread to Asia. So a mother puts a life belt on her child, for there may be peril at sea. Who knows these days? Bound for Manila, refugees till the war clouds have cleared. Goodbye as the transport steams out of the harbor past a Chinese junk and on. Buyers inspect precious heirlooms to be knocked down to the highest bidder. Headed by royalty, the British donate their jewels to war charity. And the expert buyers scrutinize some of the rarest gems in Britain. Donated anonymously, this diamond bracelet is the most magnificent gift. Proceeds of the auction to go to the Red Cross, and the bracelet is bid higher and higher.
£11,000. 500, 11,600.
Thus, Britain gives to wartime charity.
Swiss Pavilion, New York World's Fair. Watch her model an embroidered frock of flowered Swiss organdy. They're mechanical mannequins. She wears beaded organdy. Her purse and gloves are the latest in fashionable accessories. Style show as precise as clockwork. It is clockwork. Eyelet embroidery, black taffeta, and an expression of haughty pride. Haven't I a pretty sash, says she mechanically. Clever clockwork, isn't she? You'd almost expect one of these ingenious dolls to come to life. She does, alive and stylish with her long bishop sleeves, wide belt, and picture hat. You are ingenious, aren't you?
The camera highlights in the world of sports. The greatest trotter of all time, world record holder at 1 minute 55 1/4 seconds for the mile. The mighty trotter Greyhound at 8 years of age returns with his veteran trainer and driver Sepp Hallen to crash once again the headlines of Grand Circuit harness racing. You see him here pounding over the track at Good Time Park in Goshen, New York. An exclusive Movietone camera study of the dappled gray flyer on the scene of some of his greatest triumphs. For it was here 5 years ago that the Gray Ghost established a record time for a Hamiltonian winner. Through the lens of the slow-motion camera, we see again the flowing power in those graceful strides, the speed, the stamina that marks this gelding the mightiest of them all, the leg drive that shattered the record of the illustrious Peter Manning, a record that stood for 16 years. Truly a picture horse, judged on his form as a champion, this aging Gray Ghost is still rated beauty unsurpassed. In the old fiesta town of Pamplona, it looks like things might be getting back to normal. For with the advent of the Feast of St. Firmin comes the observance of a time-honored custom of chasing the bulls down Main Street on their way to the arena, where the gates are opened and the sport-loving populace files in like a bleacher crowd arriving for a Brooklyn doubleheader. Once inside the old amphitheater, the bulls get to feeling right at home, and being sort of fed up with it all, promptly turn on the customers, and for the next 2 hours, it's hard telling who's chasing whom. You'll notice that Ferdy's horns have been dulled somewhat by covering the points. Otherwise, Pamplona's playboys might be picking antlers out of their back pockets for some time to come, and that's no bull.
Empty news from the wide-open spaces. Certainly they look sad. Did you ever get shaved by your wife? Well, you ain't missed nothing. It's a contest at Renton, Wyoming. And those heroes, all in a lather, is their husbands. Lady, that's a face, not the laundry. Please, he said once over, not all over. One sculptor, or barber, uses the clippers. This pulls the weeds out by the roots, mows the lawn close, and puts a permanent wave in the cheek. The others just do plain carving. Afterwards, they put water in the mouth to see if the face leaks. Does it hurt, dear? Next, they're also inner patched. Some of them ain't got enough face left for a blank look.
France surrendering to Germany, Britain demands measures to keep these warships from falling into Nazi hands. The French refuse an ultimatum from a British squadron, so the British open fire. flower of the French Navy, vital in the balance of sea power. The greatest naval action of the present war, and it's between the fleets of the two former. In the pounding shell fire, warships explode in flames. He breaks through the British cordon and reaches France. There's the Strasbourg, shooting as it runs. Some smaller ships escape similarly. Otherwise, utter destruction. There's the battleship Bretagne, capsized, keel up, once the pride of France. Survivors are rescued. There were 1,000 casualties in this tragic episode, forced by the relentless logic of war. The destruction is fantastic, a nightmare of twisted steel. It happened 5 months ago. Now these pictures made by French sailors reach the United States by a circuitous route through various censorships and after long vicissitudes. An adventure of film. The devastation, the fury, and the fire of naval action are shown in motion pictures that are a page of history, the Battle of Oran. Italian troops landing in Albania for the unlucky invasion of Greece. Squadrons of light tanks were mobilized, and batteries of mountain artillery. The attack began optimistically. They drove across the Greek frontier after fascist demands had been rejected by Athens. Rough going in difficult mountain country. Pushing into a roadless wilderness of steep trails, there's danger of surprise attack and ambuscade. Bridge blown up by the Greeks. A hasty military bridge constructed by the Italians. These pictures give a vivid understanding of the collapse of the Italians. Country too tough for mechanized units, tough even for mule cart. The Greeks swooped down, driving the Italians back, capturing the base at Carruthers. Invasion turned into defeat in the rugged heights of the Pindus Mountains, a natural rampart of Greece. The shadow of the wings of havoc. With bombs, Japan seeks to cut the Burma Road. High explosive rain on a Chinese center. The glint of bomb bursts seen from on high. They fly on over the Burma Road, fantastically winding highway through mountain wilds. Trucks are seen speeding with Chinese war supplies. A vital point is the bridge across the river. This is near the frontier of China and Burma. The bombs flash down at the target. Bridge and explosion. Bombs in the situation that followed Japan's alliance with Germany and Italy. Britain reopened the Burma Road. This is Japan's retort, seeking to cut the road. Here is what war flyers see when they bomb an objective far below.
Philadelphia's Franklin Field, entwined in the ivy of another Cornell, Pennsylvania classic, unfolds this lovely autumn afternoon like a movie thriller out of Hollywood. For as the Big Red begins to roll, it looks like the build-up for something slightly terrific. Landsberg, Cornell's fullback, snares McCullough's pass here to fall within 2 yards of the goal line with the game but a few minutes underway. Landsberg smashes through tackle, goes over for the Cornell touchdown. Another Cornell assault. Murphy, a fake pass. He breaks for the sideline, needles through a swarm of Pennsylvania tacklers, racing 60 yards for the second Big Red touchdown with the ball game barely 7 minutes old. But then it happens. Cornell leads 13-0. Murphy uncorks a Cornell pass, a daring play, surprise its main intent, but Frank Penn captain intercepts. The tide has turned. 5 plays later, Regan scores. In the second period, Regan again through Cornell's weakening defense to tie the score at 13-all, and the din of 80,000 fans is something to hear. Regan adding further exploits to this, his greatest day. 52 yards he dashes before Jenkins brings him down. Attempting a field goal, Davis stands on the Cornell 28. The ball sails over. Pennsylvania leads 16-13 at the half. Third period, Cornell seems to have found itself again. McCullough's pass to Murphy carries to the Penn 15. McCullough drives over from the 1, and the third quarter ends. Cornell again in the lead, 20-16. Penn's ball with Gifford on a reverse, slicing off tackle, racing 24 yards to a 1st and 10 on the Cornell 19. And for the storybook climax, we give you Francis Regan scoring his final college touchdown, giving Pennsylvania its sensational upset 22-20. To the Yale Bowl at New Haven go the Harvard Crimson for the 59th renewal of their ancient football feud. First quarter highlights show Willoughby, Yale halfback, streaking around Harvard's left end to the Crimson 15, where he's finally down. And how he's down. But there, Harvard's defense is tightened. The Bulldog is held. It happens in the third quarter. Harvard's Captain Gardella tallies the touchdown that sends the Crimson away on a scoring spree, climaxed by Lee's return of a Yale punt here in the fourth period. When the Harvard right halfback, starting from his own 21 behind a wall of Crimson blockers, spans the remaining 79 yards, the final Harvard 28, Yale nothing, bringing down the curtain on one of the dreariest seasons in Yale's football history. At Evanston, Illinois, 48,000 spectators behold Northwestern's Wildcats tangling with the Irish. Clausen, pile-driving fullback, crashing through the center of the Notre Dame line. With a minute of play remaining in the first half, Northwestern's Bill DeCorrivan passes to Clausen, who takes the ball on the 28, shedding 4 Irish tacklers. He forges to a Wildcat touchdown, the first score of the game. DeCorrivan, again carrying the mail, sends the stands into an uproar as he wheels, sidesteps, reverses his field on a spectacular dash, evading 5 Notre Dame tacklers and snaking his way to the Irish 9, where Juswick brings him down. Moments later, DeCorrivan, this time around left end, carries to the second Northwestern score. To Don Clausen go the kudos for the final Wildcat score as he circles right end to shed all tacklers on a 27-yard romp to Northwestern's victory 20-0, the second defeat for Notre Dame.
The San Francisco Conference is visited by wounded American soldiers who are welcomed by Secretary of State Stettinius. They add meaning to the international effort to abolish war. The delegates are deciding whether to admit Argentina to the conference. Soviet Foreign Commissar Molotov opposes. The opposite view as presented by Stettinius.
Mr. Chairman, fellow delegates, I should like also to refer to the fact that this question was thoroughly thrashed out this morning at the Executive Committee meeting, and at a vote of the Executive Committee, a favorable vote was taken that Argentina should be permitted to attend this conference. It was then thoroughly thrashed out at the Steering Committee, which was attended by all the chairmen of all the delegations, and again, a favorable vote was taken that Argentina should be permitted to take her place at this conference.
Then British Foreign Secretary Anthony Eden, as chairman, calls for a vote.
Those in favor of the admission of the Argentine in accordance with the terms previously agreed at our steering committee this morning will please stand up.
Led by Secretary Stettinius, heads of delegation stand, 31 in favor of admitting Argentina. Voting against, Molotov rises and finds himself one of a minority of 4. The Soviet delegate has lost on 2 counts, one to delay and another to reject Argentina. Dramatic incident at the Conference of the United Nations. The demagogue on his way to power and to world infamy as history's arch-war criminal. Hitler, at the head of Nazi gangsters, became the dictator of Germany. With him there is Röhm, one of his earliest companions, whom Hitler slaughtered in a massacre of malcontent followers. He climaxed his career of blood by plunging the world into history's greatest war. Millions died because of the megalomania of the Nazi Führer, seen here at the height of his arrogance. Megalomania of the Nazi Führer, seen here at the height of his arrogance, with the Schopper von Papen who connived in Hitler's rise to power. With Mussolini and Goering, a tyrant group whose end was to be one of ignominious doom. In the Nazi downfall, Mussolini has been executed by patriots of his own country,
and Hitler has come to an end appropriate to a war maker, the atrocities of whose Nazi regime have shocked the world. Schweinfurt, wrecked by American bombers. In a famous though costly raid, they smashed the great ball bearing plant. It was Germany's principal source of that mechanical necessity. Youngsters in uniform. In bitter end battle, some of the Nazi boy fanatics fought stubbornly. Pillaging is universal in the national downfall, a sign of the collapse of morale among the formerly well-disciplined German population, especially when a couple of Hausfraus get into a fight over the loot. American soldiers dash to a prison camp at Hammelburg. Is the gate locked? Shoot it out. They're eager to liberate American comrades, knowing how brutally prisoners of war have been treated. They're an armored unit, and are they welcome? This is the hour the prisoners have been dreaming of. They're received with hugs and kisses. Soldiers of other allies, as well as Americans, a characteristic scene as the prisoners of war in Germany are liberated. The Russian forcing of the Vistula was a key event in the knockout on the Eastern Front. Marshals Rokossovsky and Zhukov, who rose to fame in the great Soviet offensives, watched some accurate dive bombing. Savage fighting of the kind that carried the Red Army to Berlin and through hundreds of ruined towns on the way. A Nazi horror camp where wholesale murders occurred. As the Russians approached, the Germans murdered the prisoners. One more item of film evidence of Nazi atrocity. In a liberated Polish town, the oppressed people rage at German prisoners who find themselves on the receiving end. Off invaded Okinawa, a great sea and air battle rages. Japanese shot down by the hundreds. Jap suicide planes make desperate attacks, and most are down, plunging into the sea, unable to get to their targets for the suicide crash. An American crashes, unable to reach the carrier. Out comes the pilot, safe on a wing, and then onto the deck whirls a disabled plane. Hitting hard in a spectacular crash, it disintegrates, goes to pieces. The pilot has been saved, and the Japs continue to fall. The assault by land-based planes against the American fleet is beaten off. Sky full of flak as the Japs attack warships supporting the invasion of Okinawa. Scenes of plunging planes and enemy bombs land perilously near. A low-flying enemy speeds toward a warship target. Will the guns bring it down before it gets to its mark? Yes, it's hit, on fire, and crashes.
An immense crowd in Milan jams the public square where the bodies of Mussolini, fellow fascists, and his mistress are displayed. Executed by Patriot partisan forces when caught trying to escape from Italy, the degraded Duce is spurned in death by raging people at the place from which he launched the March on Rome. the gruesome end of the one-time arrogant dictator. A fire hose to disperse the mob, which vents its fury on the would-be Caesar who had ranted and strutted. The final grim scene in the end of Italian fascism, the ghastly end of the demagogue Mussolini who paraded for years as the dictator of a Balkany empire, hung up at a gasoline station.
The unveiling of a monument marks the opening of the 7th War Loan Drive of the War Activities Committee of the Motion Picture Industry. 3 veterans of Iwo Jima who were in the famous flag raising. And the monument, now disclosed, is a sculpture model from that most popular of war pictures, which shows the hoisting of the colors on Mount Suribachi. That helicopter was bought with money raised in a bond drive by pages of Congress. And now, at the Capitol in Washington, as the 7th War Loan begins, the flying machine is christened by a page of the Senate and likewise by a page of the House of Representatives. Ready for war service, the Coast Guard helicopter Congressional Page.
The president meets his mother, who has flown from their old home in Missouri for a visit to the White House. After a long life in the farm country, she sees her son, President of the United States. The mother of 8 servicemen, 1 killed in battle. In New York, the Salvation Army honors Mrs. Rose Bornholz, 8-star mother. With her children and grandchildren, Mrs. Harper Sibley of Rochester, the Golden Rule Foundation Award as the American Mother of 1945. She's consultant to the San Francisco Conference.
Getting the green light, racing comes back with a bang. After 129 days of being idle, you gotta get in shape, especially to boot one home. It's Sportsman's Park, Chicago, and the Mutual machines are mobbed. Yes, sir, the GGs are running once again. Espino Gold, number 4, stays in front to start the season a winner. And it was a right fair start for some folks. The horse paid $25.80. How are you?
For a blonde, that style of hat with a frill of stiffened black veil is most becoming. A Russian headdress is appropriate to the stately and dramatic type. Designed by Madame Pauline, a modern poke bonnet with the height in front created by ribbon bows. The influence of China is seen in a huge pagoda-like straw. These summer styles are dressy and very feminine, like that wreath of tulle and cherries. A crownless hat with its frothy tulle piled high. A large transparent sailor with a popover crown of veiling, and the light shines through the brim. And the new hat fashions go to floral effects, like that toque of roses.
The discharge of GIs under the point system begins. At Camp Dix, New Jersey, they get their final pay and war bonds they bought. Length of service, combat decorations, and dependents count in the granting of discharges.
Be glad that it was your privilege to have been an American soldier and to have defended your country in her hour of need. Goodbye and good luck to you all.
Getting their discharge papers. They're among the first of thousands who, upon the end of the European war, are being returned to civilian life.
Fellas, now you're on your own.
Going home, as other millions will after the final defeat of Japan.
Desde una base del Pacífico, el portaaviones Franklin se hizo a la mar y tomó parte en una batalla contra el Japón. Lo atacan los aviones japoneses y varios explotan en el aire. Los antiaéreos destruyen cientos de aparatos nipones, pero uno logra dar en el blanco. También se acerca un bombardero japonés que pasará la línea de fuego y dejará caer sus bombas sobre el Franklin. A bordo del portaaviones filman la escena. El fotógrafo cae, se levanta y filma el heroísmo de la dotación. La tripulación lucha contra las llamas. Cuando cayó la primera bomba, la cubierta estaba llena de aviones todos cargados de bombas que explotaron. Toneladas de bombas y explosivos que explotan, y también la Santa Bárbara. Cientos de muertos, pero los héroes continúan luchando para salvar el barco. Abajo las explosiones destruyen las máquinas. Se llena de agua y parece que es barco perdido. Desde los otros barcos parece que el Franklin va al fondo, pero sus hombres no se dan por vencidos. Quieren salvarlo. Solamente el barco más fuerte puede seguir flotando después de tantas explosiones y con los tanques de gasolina ardiendo. Y solo los marinos más valientes pueden salvar un barco que está siendo devorado por las llamas y aniquilado por las explosiones. Hasta los enormes ascensores que suben los aviones a cubierta han sido destruidos. El Franklin se inclina a un lado como si fuera a irse al fondo y el crucero Santa Fe ayuda a extinguir el fuego. Toneladas de agua caen sobre el portaaviones. Algunos marinos se quedan a un lado y el destructor Hickok los salva. La parte humana en el drama de la guerra. Un heroico episodio de la batalla del Franklin. Los heridos son los primeros que se salvan. El capellán comandante O'Callaghan, un verdadero héroe, un padre jesuita que ha salvado muchas vidas y que probablemente recibirá la medalla del Congreso de los Estados Unidos. Estos marinos se salvan saltando de bastante altura. Más vale esto que caer al agua. El portaaviones salvado, a pesar de las explosiones. Logran poner en marcha las máquinas y por su propio esfuerzo llega a los Estados Unidos. Parece cosa de milagro. Llega al puerto de Nueva York, después de haber pasado el Canal de Panamá. Un barco heroico, orgullo hoy de la Armada norteamericana.
long, fiery stream of the flamethrower is hurled against Japs fortified in caves and underground pillboxes. Through the blaze of houses, hard-fighting American troops push forward. He pulls the pin of the grenade. Throw it, soldier. A smoke screen covers advancing troops under heavy fire. Keep down, boys. The bitter battle for Okinawa. The drive into the powerful Jap line of underground fortifications and caves. An underground entrance, and Jap killers like to lurk in a cave. The two little Okinawan girls are taken to the camp where other native people of the island are given food and shelter. Including a cigarette for Grandma. A wounded dog, a canine soldier of the Marines. He helped in battle to win that trophy. Letters from home, soldiers behind the lines resting from the savage toil of battle, which continues with unrelenting fury. Army Signal Corps and Marine Corps motion pictures of the stubborn and ferocious battle on Okinawa. Armor pushes into the ruined town of Naha, capital of the island. Behind the tank, soldiers fall in for protection as they occupy a section of the town savagely defended by the Japs street by street. This is a key objective, Naha, strategic strong point of the enemy line. Georgia's famous general arrives at Atlanta, Hodges of the First Army. He's greeted by Governor Oran of Georgia. And then the commander who played so prominent a part in the defeat of Nazi Germany makes a triumphal progress through the city. A welcome for a conquering hero as Georgia hails the general whose First Army smashed across the Rhine and swept deep into Germany. General and Mrs. Courtney C. Hodges. He's the first famous frontline commander to return from Europe. King George and Queen Elizabeth are greeted by Lieutenant General Doolittle, commander of the American 8th Air Force, the bombing fleets of which played so devastating a part in the smashing of Nazi Germany. The European war over, General Doolittle will now lead his 8th Air Force against Japan. The Sovereign of Britain bestows the Order of Knight Commander of the Bath upon the famous speed and stunt flyer Jimmy Doolittle, who led the first bombing of Tokyo. The knightly decoration is honorary, so we won't be saying Sir James. It takes 85 points to make a serviceman eligible for discharge under the point system. Bombing plane tail gunner Sergeant Harold Carruthers, totaling his points for service, wounds, decorations, and dependent children, has nearly twice as many as needed. But the much decorated veteran of the air war against the Nazis is, as he shows his mother, going on to the war against the Japs. He's too essential to be discharged. In a game of darts, he displays a sharp gunner's eye. Aiming at the next objective, he's eager to reach in a bomber. Tokyo's the target, says the 168-point sergeant. Ex-President Herbert Hoover arrives at the White House to confer with President Truman on European food relief. He presents to the president plans for organization to feed the hungry in war-ravaged Europe. Herbert Hoover, in the days of the previous World War, directed food relief for Belgium and other stricken countries. He takes charge of the Department of Justice, Tom C. Clark of Texas, hitherto Assistant Attorney General. Changes in the Truman cabinet, and the new members are Westerners. Congressman from New Mexico, Clinton P. Anderson, becomes the new Secretary of Agriculture. A cabinet shift to the West. A show for wounded soldiers at a hospital theater, Mitchell Field, Long Island. The theater is so arranged that stretcher cases have an orchestra seat view of the performance, which includes the dancing of the can-can. Then the girls visit wounded soldiers brought recently from battlefronts. They have a chat, no doubt, about the serious problems of the world, or could there be a bit of kidding? And then the Latin Quarter Review goes on with a dance.
Oh, Papa, look! Elephants piggyback. Yes, son. It's the summer opening of the St. Louis Zoo. Watch now. They're playing, huh, Papa? Playing like it was a barber shop? Yes, son. Papa, can I shave you like that when we go home? And look, cologne water spritzed in the puss. Yes, son, quiet. Some fun, hey, Papa? Oh, Papa, the pussy's mad, huh? No, son, he's a lion. He's lying? He ain't mad, Papa? Those kids think he's mad. Papa, could you do like that man? Why, certainly, son. Papa, you're a lion. You're afraid of Mama. Look, son, monkeys. Yeah. Ain't they the craziest people, Papa? Hey, kids, look. Now he's dancing. Like Aunt Minnie, hey, Pop? La, 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 la.
Reporting to President Truman, Joseph E. Davies and Harry Hopkins, who were sent by the President on missions to London and Moscow. A Truman-Churchill-Stalin meeting has been arranged. And in Moscow, Hopkins negotiated Soviet concessions in the veto problem at the San Francisco Conference and in the question of Poland. The Allied Control Commission to govern conquered Germany organizes and in Berlin begins its task. The Soviet representative, Marshal Zhukov, signs the agreement under which the occupied enemy country will be administered. The Russians are to control eastern and central Germany. French representative, General de Tassigny. France is to occupy western parts of Germany along the Rhine. Field Marshal Sir Bernard Montgomery, Britain's ace commander of victory, represents his country on the commission. Britain to hold northwestern Germany. General Eisenhower for the United States. The Americans to control southern Germany. The commander of victory in the West is to stay on this job. The Control Commission is of dominant importance in the suppression of Nazism in Germany and the establishment of peace arrangements in Europe. Underground, below Hitler's mountain retreat, looks like a jail cell. That's the keynote in the strange subterranean place of tunnels and rooms. An American GI in the library of the Nazi Fuhrer who had a luxurious house above ground and his real residence deep down in the rock. Here the tyrant, ever in fear of assassination, hid away in a subterranean lair, a labyrinth of tunnels guarded by many doors. It's like a sinister mystery scene as doors of steel are opened one after another. Hitler's bedroom, where the arch war criminal sought a feeling of safety and sleep, now in tumbled disorder like the ruin of Nazi hopes. Hitler's guarded, secret, terror-haunted home with an art gallery of loot. British fog was one of the greatest enemies of Allied air power. But the misty enemy was beaten like that. Fire and intense heat cleared out pea soup fogs at British airfields. Another secret miracle of war that can now be disclosed. British scientists, on order from Prime Minister Churchill, devised the method. fog killed by heat waves. As seen from a plane, the field cleared of fog and marked by special lights. The plane landing in fog-killing heat waves. Before that secret was discovered, hundreds of bombers blasting Nazi Germany were lost, crashing in pea-soup fogs at air bases. More than 10,000 British bombers landed like that, not counting the many thousands of American planes. Fog defeated, also Nazi Germany. Completing the conquest of the island of Mindanao. Air bombs blot out Jap strong points, and the bomb bursts are like a flooding tide of fiery explosions. Army Air Force motion pictures, filmed from high above, present some of the most spectacular bombing scenes ever filmed. A deluge of high explosives, blanketing a fortified area of jungle country with flashing rings of pulverizing destruction. The Ipoh Dam, last important section in northern Manila to be captured. Here, a party of troops is waiting for Japs to surrender, on vigilant guard against treachery. The Japs, who must take their clothes off to be sure they don't conceal weapons. They've been summoned to surrender by loudspeakers, a Filipino with the Americans calling to them in Japanese. Deciding not to die for their Mikado, these Japs yield themselves as prisoners, and one familiar trophy is a Burnseye sword. And now to the prison camp. And get along there, Jap. The Ipoh Dam, a source of the Manila water supply. Army Signal Corps motion pictures show the structure captured undamaged, and over it flies the American flag. They come streaming by ship, by plane. 3.5 million men. It took nearly 4 years to move those men to the European front. They must now be moved to the Pacific in the next few months. Not only will men be moving home for furloughs before shipping out to the Pacific, but some will be moving to hospitals for further rest and convalescence. So don't travel unless it's on war service, says Colonel Johnson, head of the Office of Defense Transportation.
The vacation season this year coincides with the peak of returning military travel. I ask you to help make the greatest movement in all transportation history possible by spending your vacation at home.
Come with me, my love, in my gondola. We'll glide 'neath the stars and the moon and love's serenade. Hey, stop that dancing back there. Anyway, it's just some G.I. Joes relaxing in romantic Venice, and you can't hate a fella for trying. Here come the ducks. And how do you like that? A left turn right into the Grand Canal.
At Prairie du Chien, Wisconsin, Lieutenant Colonel Francis Gabreski is married.
I, Francis Gabreski.
Take thee, Catherine Cochran.
Take thee, Catherine Cochran.
For my lawful wife.
For my lawful wife.
Till death do us part.
Till death do us part.
I, Catherine Cochran.
I, Catherine Cochran.
Take thee, Francis Gabreski.
Take thee, Francis Gabreski.
For my lawful husband.
For my lawful husband.
Till death do us part.
Till death do us part.
One of the great aces of the European War, he shot down 28 Nazi planes and then was a prisoner of war in Germany. Now home and wedding bells. This arrival by air begins a record-breaking ovation.
New York and General Eisenhower. With New York's Mayor Lydia, the commander of victory in Europe proceeds to the climax of his welcome home. New York is really set for a triumph. That must be the key to Brooklyn. In Central Park, tens of thousands of school children, miles of them along the line of the drive through the park. Down Fifth Avenue through immense cheering crowds. Lady, control your enthusiasm. He personifies victory in the bitter war against the brutal Nazi enemy. At St. Patrick's Cathedral, church dignitaries, and everywhere teeming New Yorkers hail the glory of General Ike with a frenzy of cheering. Dwight D. Eisenhower, Supreme Commander of the Western Allies, receives the greatest for has a city of such magnitude, with so many people along so long a route, given a human being such an ovation. The arrival at City Hall, where formal civic honors are paid to the idol of the hour, and the crowd surges forward. City Hall Park, a fraction of the thronging crowds that have turned out to greet Eisenhower, 4 million in all. And never have honors been paid to a soldier less pretentious than General Ike.
Mr. Mayor and New Yorkers, as my first act as a citizen of the city of New York, I want to issue to the mayor a word of warning. New York simply can't do this to a Kansas farmer boy and keep its reputation for sophistication. There's another thing, Mr. Mayor, that impressed me very much as you and I rode down through the cheering throngs this morning. First, the reason for the cheering. It was not because one individual, one American came back from war. It is rejoicing that a nasty job is done. One nasty job is finished.
Now to the baseball park. Typical and most American of this Supermander, his one request was that he be taken to the ball game. So now a fast trip amid a pandemonium of cheers and motorcycle sirens. Crowds breaking up. Typical scenes all over New York. And then at the Polo Grounds, the nation's #1 fan. The general tells how before he went to West Point, he was for a while a baseball player. So he knows about hits, runs, and errors. An especially made bat presented by the rival managers in today's game. Bob Coleman of the Braves, Mel Out of the Giants. And play ball. That night at the Waldorf Astoria, General Eisenhower speaks of the remaining half of the global war.
This war in the Pacific will be won, and it will be won in the speediest possible time because America will put her heart and her whole effort into it. When that is done, we face two problems that are related. One, jobs for all the soldiers, and two, peace. Prosperous nations are not war hungry. But hungry nations will always go to war.
West Point, a parade by the summer class in battle dress. The military academy pays honor to the victorious general who here is on old ground on a visit to his alma mater. With General Wilkie, superintendent of West Point, as the march of the wartime cadets pays homage to a great American, General Ike.
From the blimp overhead, there's a great camera view of the big British liner jammed with homecoming American troops. Past the statue of that liberty which they fought to preserve, more than 14,000 Army and Navy men returning from the victory in Europe, they see telltale sights of home. Britain's liner, the Queen Mary, the war's greatest troop ship. She made records taking soldiers to war, and now she brings them back.
Over 30,000 spectators jam Newmarket, the wartime home of the Derby. The Princess Elizabeth attends along with her parents, their majesties, the King and Queen. The thoroughbreds leave the paddock and parade to the post for the 165th running of the Derby. The starter mounts the stand, umbrella and all. Quite right, there might be a cloud, you know. And they're away to a good start. A closely packed field of 27, all vying for position as they pass the camera for the first time in this, the historic 165th running of the Derby. Dante, the favorite, shows his class as they come into the stretch and romps home a winner by more than 2 lengths. In the winner's circle, Jockey Nevitt has an opportunity of a lifetime. He meets the King, and just between us, the King had the wrong horse. Rising Light was his choice, but from the looks of things, Jockey Nevitt should have backed Raising Hare.
President Truman arrives for an event that makes history. Chief Delegate Stettinius and colleagues representing the United States as the President comes for the founding of the United Nations. Then through those streets to the rally for world peace. San Francisco, site of the conference, hails the President. The conference. There has been long deliberation. There have been differences of opinion. Now the final vote, a standing vote. Chief delegates rise, each signifying aye for his country. The vote unanimous, adopting the Charter of the United Nations. Signing of the Charter. China, first in the war against aggression, is first to sign, represented by Dr. Wellington Koo.
Twice in a lifetime, the forces of aggression have engulfed the world in a torrent of bloodshed and destruction. China, who was the first nation to be attacked by these forces in the present conflict, feels especially glad today that the United Nations here in San Francisco, on the hospitable soil of the United States, have written a constitution for the new edifice of world peace.
For Soviet Russia, Ambassador Gromyko. Russia made concessions that permitted agreement on vital points. For Great Britain, Ambassador Halifax. Threats of war will be placed before all the United Nations. France, represented by Paul Boncourt, is one of the big 5 which will control the use of force. Mexico signs the Charter. 50 United Nations in all. Greece. Saudi Arabia, nations all around the world. Brazil. America. As the host to the United Nations Conference, America is last. Chief Delegate Stettinius signs the Charter, championed by the late President Roosevelt and by his successor. President Truman at the final session of the San Francisco Conference. Since named American representative to the United Nations Council, Stettinius here announces the complete success of the San Francisco Conference.
The San Francisco Conference has fulfilled its mandate. The charter of a permanent United Nations has now been written.
And the Conference of the United Nations is closed by President Truman, who speaks as the voice of America.
Between the victory in Europe and the final victory in Japan, in this most destructive of all wars, you have won a victory against war itself. If we had had this charter a few years ago, and above all the will to use it, millions now dead would be alive. If we should falter in the future in our will to use it, millions now living will surely die. We all have to recognize, no matter how great our strength, that we must deny ourselves the license to do always as we please. No one nation, no regional group can or should expect any special privilege which harms any other nation. Well, there's a time for making plans, and there's a time for action. The time for action is here now. Let us, therefore, each in his own nation and according to its own way, seek immediate approval of this charter and make it a living thing. I shall send this charter to the United States Senate at once. I am sure that the overwhelming sentiment of the people of my country and of their representatives in the Senate is in favor of immediate ratification. Let us not fail to grasp this supreme chance to establish a worldwide rule of reason, to create an enduring peace under the guidance of God.
Independence, Missouri welcomes home the President of the United States. No other small-town boy has ever risen higher. The Truman House. Everywhere else, he's Mr. President. But here among his native townsmen, it's Hiya Harry. As he walks to that familiar front porch, he's just a neighbor among neighbors. At the Independence Auditorium, there's a rally of the home folks. People of the town and county. Mrs. Truman is there, and so is daughter Margaret. The President comes to address them, not as the chief of the government of the nation, but just as an old friend coming to make a friendly, familiar talk.
I'm going to spend the next 2 or 3 days in Jackson County trying my best with all the handicaps which a President of the United States has to enjoy myself with you as I formerly did from the time I was county judge in Glamour. That I'd give anything in the world if I could shake hands with every one of you individually and say to you what I would say ordinarily. But you understand that I'm not made out of cast iron. I just simply can't do it, although I put on some of the greatest athletes in these trips around the country. I hope you'll appreciate the fact that I'm now shaking hands with every one of you.
History in law and justice is being made. The judges representing the major powers, America, Britain, Russia, France, with British Lord Justice Lawrence presiding. The defendants, 20 leaders of Nazi Germany. They are charged with atrocity and war, on the principle that war making is a crime. American Prosecutor Supreme Court Justice Jackson states,
"The privilege of opening the first trial in history for crimes against the peace of the world imposes a grave responsibility. The wrongs which we seek to condemn and punish have been so calculated, so malignant and so devastating that civilization cannot tolerate their being ignored, because it cannot survive their being repeated. That four great nations, flushed with victory and stung with injury, stay the hand of vengeance and voluntarily submit their captive enemies to the judgment of the law is one of the most significant tributes that power has ever paid to reason."
Goering called upon to plead. Number 2 Nazi, second to Hitler, he tries to make a speech.
Bevor ich die Frage des Gerichtshofes beantworte, ob ich mich schuldig oder nicht schuldig bekenne, I informed the court that defendants were not entitled to make a statement. You must plead guilty or not guilty. Bekenne mich im Sinne der Anklage nicht schuldig.
He pleads not guilty of the crimes of the Nazis. In a pose of being out of his mind, Rudolf Hess, who made the crackpot flight to Scotland, now summoned.
Rudolf Hess.
He goes to plead. What is it, guilty or not guilty?
9.
9? No? No what? What kind of a plea is that? A question for the British justice.
That will be entered as a plea of not guilty.
The next to answer is Hitler's foreign minister von Ribbentrop.
Ich bekenne mich im Sinne der Anklage für nicht schuldig.
And accused in the Nazi conspiracy to make war, the former German chief of staff.
Wilhelm Keitel.
Ich bekenne mich nicht schuldig.
He pleads like all the rest. All plead not guilty. And once again in the court, Goering wants to make a speech, tries to deliver a harangue.
You are not entitled to address the tribunal except through your counsel at the present time.
No, this is no Nazi rally. Speech making is verboten. Emperor Hirohito goes to a shrine of the Japanese imperial dynasty at Osakawa near Tokyo, a legended temple of Shinto ancestor worship. According to old tradition, he must give a report to his ancestors, a report on how things are going in Japan. Must be embarrassing for the Mikado. He is received by Shinto priests of the shrine as he comes with the bad news. With complicated ritual, the imperial ancestors are informed that Japan has lost the war, which must leave the ancestors in startled surprise to hear of American troops in Tokyo with MacArthur giving orders to the Mikado.
At the dock, looking for her husband. Annabella can't find him at first among the many Marines returning home.